Diff'rent Strokes wasn't just a sitcom, it was a cultural touchstone that made audiences laugh while tackling serious issues with heart and humor. For 8 seasons, fans fell in love with the Drummond family and their unforgettable journey. But behind the laughter and on-screen charm, the real lives of several cast members were marked by tragedy, struggles, and untimely loss. In this emotional tribute, we look back at the stars of Diff'rent Strokes who left us too soon, honoring their contributions to television and remembering the bittersweet endings that shocked and saddened the world. Gary Wayne Coleman was born on February 8, 1968, in Zion, Illinois, and from the moment he could walk, the world seemed determined to remind him of what he lacked. Diagnosed with a congenital kidney disorder that stunted his growth, Gary would never grow beyond 4 feet 8 inches and would never escape the shadow of Arnold Jackson, the wisecracking, lovable child star of Diff'rent Strokes who catapulted him into international fame at just 10 years old. But Gary's real life bore little resemblance to the laughter-filled world he portrayed on screen. Adopted by a nurse and a forklift operator, Gary's childhood was marked by surgeries, dialysis, and pain, both physical and emotional. Hollywood offered him a dream, but it was one managed and manipulated by adults who saw a paycheck more than a person. As Arnold, he became a household name between 1978 and 1986, delivering the now famous line, "Watch you talkin', 'bout Willis," with perfect comedic timing. Off-screen, though, the camera stopped, and so did the care. Gary was sharp, sarcastic, and fiercely independent, traits that clashed with the infantilization he endured as a public figure. After Diff'rent Strokes ended, he struggled to find work. Roles dried up, and Gary, still seen as a child in a man's body, found himself battling not just obscurity but betrayal. In 1989, he sued his adoptive parents and former business advisor, accusing them of misappropriating his $3.8 million trust fund. He won the case, but the victory was hollow. The money was gone, and so was the innocence. His life spiraled. He worked as a security guard, appeared in reality shows, and even took odd jobs to stay afloat. The pain of being ridiculed, of being forgotten, hardened him. In interviews, Gary often appeared bitter, tired of being asked about Arnold, tired of smiling when he felt broken. His 2007 marriage to Shannon Price was stormy and short-lived, filled with accusations of abuse and exploitation. It was less a romance than a brief truce with loneliness. On May 28, 2010, Gary Coleman died of a brain hemorrhage in Provo, Utah, after a fall in his home. He was 42. He died with an estimated net worth of just $75,000, far from the millions he had once earned. His final years were marked by illness, public scorn, and legal battles over his remains. Yet his face, forever youthful, forever stuck in time, remains etched in memory, a tragic emblem of a boy who brought joy to millions while silently carrying a life that never gave him peace. Dana Michelle Plato was born on November 7, 1964, in Maywood, California. Abandoned by her teenage mother at birth and adopted by Dean and Florine Plato, Dana's early life was already carved with absence. By age 7, she was in TV commercials. By 13, she was Kimberly Drummond on Diff'rent Strokes, America's sweetheart in pigtails. But the girl on screen and the girl behind the scenes were never the same, and Dana knew it. She was performing happiness, not living it. Raised in a chaotic home where her adoptive mother pushed her into stardom, Dana's childhood dissolved into a blur of scripts and screen tests. Fame came early and heavy. While she smiled beside Todd Bridges and Gary Coleman under the studio lights from 1978 to 1984, real life was already slipping through her fingers. She began using alcohol at 14. By the time she was written out of the show due to a surprise pregnancy at age 19, Dana was spiraling, grasping for any kind of control. The world she was trained to belong to, the world of Hollywood, vanished the moment she grew up. Roles dried up. She posed for Playboy, attempted a music career, and tried to outrun the tabloid headlines. Arrested for robbing a video store in 1991 with only a pellet gun, Dana became a punchline. She told the judge she needed food for her son. America laughed. She didn't. Her personality was fragile, sometimes giddy, other times subdued, like someone stuck between the role she was expected to play and the woman she could never find the space to become. Her life became an open wound. Her son, Tyler, was the only relationship she clung to. But even that love was not enough to pull her back from the edge. On May 8, 1999, just one day after appearing on The Howard Stern Show where she insisted she was clean and hopeful, Dana died of an overdose of Valium and Lortab at the age of 34 in her motorhome in Moore, Oklahoma. The coroner ruled it a suicide. At the time of her death, her net worth was a mere $1,000, a haunting reflection of how far she had fallen. Dana Plato died not just from drugs, but from the slow erosion of identity that comes when a child star is used, forgotten, and discarded. She once said she felt like the world loved Kimberly, but not her. And maybe she was right. Conrad Stafford Bain was born on February 4, 1923, in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada, into a modest family where discipline was a necessity, not a choice. His father was a station master, and life during the Great Depression was more about survival than dreams. Yet Conrad quietly cultivated a fascination with performance, not the kind that begged for attention, but the kind that searched for truth in other people's words. It would become his silent rebellion against a life too plain to be lived only once. After serving in the Canadian Army during World War II, Bain studied acting in New York at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, where he met Charles Durning. For years he toiled in theater and bit parts, his name unknown, his talent often overshadowed. Then, in the twilight of his 50s, he landed the role that would define him. Philip Drummond, the kind, wealthy white man who adopted two black boys on Diff'rent Strokes, 1978 to 1986. He was the rock amid chaos, the voice of reason in a sitcom built on contrast. America adored him. But fame didn't change him, it wearied him. Conrad was a reserved man, almost monk-like, uncomfortable with celebrity. The sitcom's success was bittersweet. Off-screen, he watched the younger cast, Dana Plato, Gary Coleman, and Todd Bridges, fall into addiction, crime, and despair. He played their protector on screen but felt powerless in real life. In interviews, he spoke softly of the tragedy of being famous too soon. There was guilt in his voice, though no one blamed him. His marriage to Monica Sloan lasted over 60 years, a rare constant in a profession of vanishing things. Yet even this came at a cost. Bain often put duty before passion. He longed to write, to return to the stage, but obligations and expectations held him in place. His twin brother, Bonner Bain, also an actor, struggled with being seen as Conrad's shadow, something that deeply affected them both. As time passed and the lights dimmed, Conrad withdrew from Hollywood. His roles faded, but so did his need to be seen. He lived quietly, almost anonymously in California. On January 14, 2013, he died of a stroke at age 89. His net worth was estimated at $2 million, not extravagant, but quietly earned, much like the man himself. In the end, Conrad Bain was not Philip Drummond. He was gentler, lonelier, more complex. He carried the sorrow of watching the children he worked with unravel, and the burden of being everyone's father but not always his own. His life was not marked by scandal, but by the quiet ache of knowing that good men often go unnoticed until they're gone. Charlotte Ray Labotsky was born on April 22, 1926, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Jewish immigrant parents who ran a small tire business during the Great Depression. Her father, though hardworking, struggled to keep the business afloat, and her mother battled with emotional instability. From a young age, Charlotte learned that laughter could be armor, a way to survive in a world that so often didn't feel safe. Behind her bright eyes was a child aching to feel secure. She discovered theater as a teenager, a place where pain could be transformed into purpose. Trained at Northwestern University and the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York, she carved her path slowly through radio, theater, and eventually television. Fame came late. It wasn't until Diff'rent Strokes in 1978, when she stepped into the role of Edna Garrett, that she became a household name. Her character, warm, maternal, sharp, became a cultural cornerstone, later leading the Facts of Life through its 9-year run. But off-screen, Charlotte's own life bore little resemblance to the comfort she offered others. She was deeply empathetic, often absorbing the pain of those around her. Her marriage to composer John Strauss, which began with love and creative partnership, collapsed when he came out as bisexual after 25 years together. The revelation devastated her. She stayed, tried to understand, but the emotional rupture never fully healed. They eventually divorced. The betrayal lingered. Her son Andy, born with autism and epilepsy, required constant care. Charlotte fought fiercely for his well-being, even as it drained her. Fame didn't protect her from the exhaustion, nor did it ease the heartbreak of watching a child suffer. The world adored Mrs. Garrett, but Charlotte often went home to silence and worry. She masked her sorrow with laughter, her fear with professionalism. Her personality was buoyant, nurturing, but tinged with fatigue, an actress who gave everything and rarely asked for anything back. In her later years, she battled pancreatic cancer, survived it, and then faced bone cancer with the same quiet bravery that had defined her life. She wrote a memoir, not to glamorize, but to finally speak her truth. Charlotte Rae died on August 5, 2018, in Los Angeles at the age of 92. Her net worth was estimated at $4 million. It was a life of modest wealth, great endurance, and a quiet kind of fame that outlasted the chaos around her. Charlotte Rae didn't just play a caretaker, she was one. For her family. For the broken children around her on set. For a generation who needed warmth in their living rooms. But in the end, like many who give so much, she bore her burdens mostly alone. Sherman Alexander Hemsley was born on February 1, 1938, in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His mother worked in a factory to raise him alone. His father was never there. Growing up in a world of broken windows and broken promises, Sherman learned early how to disappear into characters, clowning in classrooms and dreaming under street lamps. But what made him laugh often came from a place of deep longing. He wasn't escaping the world, he was begging it to notice him. Before fame, he was a postal clerk by day and a theater actor by night. His rise wasn't meteoric, it was earned in shadows. Then came All in the Family, and later The Jeffersons, where he embodied George Jefferson. Loud, confident, unshakable. Audiences loved the bluster, the strut, the razor-sharp wit. And when he briefly joined Diff'rent Strokes as Captain Marion Savage in the mid-90s, his presence still commanded the screen. But Sherman Hemsley was nothing like his characters. Offstage, he was intensely private, soft-spoken, solitary, almost painfully shy. He never married, never had children, and rarely gave interviews. His home in El Paso, Texas, became a self-imposed fortress. He called it peace. Others whispered loneliness. Fame brought him comfort, but it never gave him connection. His humor was legendary, but his silence spoke louder. Friends said he often stayed in character at parties, unable, or unwilling, to show the real man behind the curtain. In truth, Sherman lived a life filled with contradictions. He hated attention, yet craved purpose. He played bold men, but felt small in his own skin. The roles he portrayed overshadowed the soul within. There were no scandals, no arrests, just a long, quiet echo of a man who spent years making the world laugh, while rarely laughing for himself. On July 24, 2012, Sherman Hemsley died at age 74 from superior vena cava syndrome, a complication of lung cancer. His death was followed by a bizarre legal battle over his body, with an old friend and a supposed brother fighting for control. Even in death, peace eluded him. His net worth was estimated at $3 million, not lavish for a man who had once been America's sitcom royalty. Sherman Hemsley made millions laugh, yet lived alone in silence. In the end, he was not George Jefferson. He was the man who brought George to life, then quietly faded away, unheard but never truly forgotten. John Lawler was born on November 5, 1941, in Minnesota. An ordinary place for an ordinary boy, but he always felt just out of step with the world around him. Raised in a working-class Catholic household, John's youth was defined by restraint. His father, a railroad worker, spoke little, worked much, and expected even more. John's dreams of the stage were a quiet rebellion against the life laid out for him. He studied acting in New York, barely scraping by, doing odd jobs and sharing cramped apartments with other struggling artists. His break came modestly, small roles, commercials, and eventually, in 1979, the role of Headmaster Stephen Bradley in The Facts of Life, a spin-off from Diff'rent Strokes. He was stern but likable, the calm among teenage storms. Though only present during the show's first season, his performance made an impression. He later appeared in a crossover episode of Diff'rent Strokes, bringing a quiet gravity to the comedy-heavy world. But fame didn't follow. His character was written out as the show shifted focus. And just like that, he was gone, erased not with scandal, but with silence. Unlike many of his peers, John wasn't built for fame. He didn't chase Hollywood parties or headlines. He had a reserved, introspective nature, sometimes mistaken for aloofness, more accurately rooted in self-doubt. He continued acting sporadically, appearing in films like Wyatt Earp and The Rock, but always in the background. Always the supporting voice. Lawler's marriage to fellow actress Peggy Fury, his true emotional anchor, ended in tragedy. In 1985, Fury died in a car crash, a wound that John never spoke about publicly, but one that never seemed to heal. After her death, he pulled back from the industry almost entirely. Acting, which had once been his escape, became too closely tied to memory. He lived the rest of his years in quiet seclusion, far from the cameras, teaching acting and mentoring young performers with a tender strictness. His was a life lived largely in the margins, rarely known, rarely noticed, but never bitter. As of today, John Lawler is still alive, his legacy quiet but intact. His estimated net worth is under $1 million, a reflection not of failure, but of a man who never sold his soul for fame. He remains a ghost in the history of television, brief, sincere, and often forgotten. But for a moment he stood at the front of the class and we listened. Dixie Virginia Carter was born on May 25, 1939, in Macklemoresville, Tennessee, a tiny town where the heat hung heavy and expectations for women were even heavier. Raised in a conservative Southern family, she was taught to smile, sit straight, and never raise her voice. But deep inside, Dixie burned with a quiet defiance. The stage became her escape from the narrow life waiting for her. But with escape came cost. After graduating from the University of Memphis and studying classical music and theater, Dixie spent years struggling in off-Broadway roles. Her beauty opened doors, but it also boxed her in. Producers wanted a pretty face, not a woman with fierce intelligence and ambition. Her breakthrough didn't come until middle age, when she earned acclaim as the elegant but razor-sharp Julia Sugarbaker on Designing Women. Audiences loved her fiery monologues and righteous Southern pride. Yet behind the poised exterior, Dixie Carter was a woman at odds with the roles she was given and the image she was forced to maintain. In 1984 to 1985, she briefly appeared in Diff'rent Strokes, playing Margaret Maggie McKinney, a love interest and later fiancée to Conrad Bain's Philip Drummond. But it wasn't her show. She fit in, yes, but she didn't belong. The sitcom's tone was too light for a woman whose performances always carried a shade of shadow. Dixie had depth the world rarely allowed her to show. Her personal life was layered with contradictions. Married 3 times, her second marriage to Broadway actor George Hearn ended in heartbreak. But in her third, to actor Hal Holbrook, she found something rare: stability, mutual respect, and an intellectual equal. Yet even that union was marked by long separations, differing political views, and the tension of 2 artists living parallel but separate lives. She once admitted she often felt alone, even when she wasn't. Though known for her charm, Dixie was never truly at ease in Hollywood. She disliked confrontation but loathed superficiality even more. She had strong conservative values, which clashed with her liberal peers. She felt misunderstood even in success. On April 10, 2010, Dixie Carter died from endometrial cancer in Houston, Texas, at the age of 70. Her net worth at the time was estimated at $10 million. But the figure did little to reflect the battles she fought. Against typecasting, against silence, against the erasure of complex women. Dixie Carter wasn't just a Southern lady with sharp wit. She was a woman who longed to be seen as more than what the world expected. And though she played many roles, the one she wanted most, the one of a whole, complicated, deeply human woman, was always just out of reach. Latari was born on April 21, 1946, in Ohio, into a working-class African-American family during a time when opportunities were scarce and prejudice was everywhere. His early years were shaped by a quiet struggle. His family fought to keep food on the table, and young Lou learned early how to lower his voice, shrink himself, and stay out of trouble. But behind that silence was a deep well of sensitivity and humor, waiting for a stage that might never come. He came to acting late and with little formal training. His breakout came in the 1970s blaxploitation film Brotherhood of Death, a bold, angry film that gave him his first real voice. He had a commanding presence, with kind eyes that softened the edges of every role he played. But Hollywood didn't offer many spaces for men like Lou. He was typecast often, overlooked even more. Still he kept going. The joy of performing mattered more than the size of the part. In the early 1980s, he landed a recurring role as Ted Ramsey, the father of Dudley, on Diff'rent Strokes. For once, he wasn't playing a stereotype. He was a loving, steady father figure, grounded and wise. On a show filled with chaos and tragedy behind the scenes, Lou brought a quiet stability. But it was short-lived. His appearances were limited, and once again, he faded into the background of an industry that never fully embraced him. Off-screen, Lou was intensely private. He never married publicly, and little is known about his personal relationships. He was gentle, soft-spoken, and deeply spiritual. Those close to him described a man who cared more about kindness than fame, more about truth than recognition. Yet as he aged, the roles dried up. The phone stopped ringing. The industry that once flirted with him now turned its back. On April 4, 1987, just weeks before his 41st birthday, Latari died suddenly of a heart attack. He died young, with so much left unsaid and unshown. His net worth at the time of death was modest, estimated at under $100,000. But the wealth he carried was quieter: dignity, integrity, and a legacy of being one of the few steady lights in a world that often burned people up. Latari never got the spotlight he deserved. But for a moment he stood in it, and gave audiences a father, a protector, and a rare glimpse of black masculinity grounded in gentleness, not rage. He is missed not for the fame he had, but for the decency he embodied. Todd Anthony Bridges was born on May 27, 1965, in San Francisco, California, into a family that seemed destined for show business. His mother was an actress, his father a talent agent. But behind the image of opportunity was instability. Drugs, violence, and broken promises were part of the landscape. Todd was just 6 when he started acting, and by 13, he was Willis Jackson on Diff'rent Strokes, a role that made him a star but also chained him to a version of himself he could never quite escape. As Willis, Todd was the cool, protective older brother, a streetwise teen with heart. Audiences adored him. But success came too soon. Fame was a tidal wave he was never taught to swim in. While the cameras captured his smile, off-screen he was sinking, exposed too early to Hollywood's darkest corners. He began using drugs as a teenager, numbing himself against the pressure, the loneliness, and the trauma he didn't yet know how to name. The 1980s were brutal. After Diff'rent Strokes ended in 1986, Todd spiraled into addiction, landing in jail multiple times. In 1989, he was charged with attempted murder after allegedly shooting a drug dealer. He was acquitted, but the stigma remained. Offers dried up. Friends disappeared. He had gone from beloved child star to tabloid fodder, and the fall was merciless. Todd later spoke of being sexually abused by a publicist when he was a child, something he buried for years beneath rage and drugs. The smile the world remembered had long been replaced by a hollow stare. But unlike many of his co-stars, Todd survived. His personality, once cocky and vibrant, became more introspective. He fought through rehab, fell back, then tried again. Recovery wasn't a straight line. It was a fight with himself. His personal life was complicated. He married once and had a son, but the marriage didn't last. Fatherhood gave him something to hold on to, even when the rest of his world was in ruins. He later became a motivational speaker, trying to prevent other young actors from falling into the same traps. Today, Todd Bridges is still alive, a rarity among the Diff'rent Strokes cast. As of recent estimates, his net worth is around $250,000. It's a far cry from the millions once promised, but it reflects something more enduring: survival. After decades of addiction, arrests, and lost years, he has clawed back some measure of peace. Todd Bridges didn't just outlive the show, he outlived the curse that seemed to haunt every young star around him. But his survival came with scars, and his smile, older now, wearier, carries the weight of everything he had to endure just to remain standing. Which character from Diff'rent Strokes, TV series 1978 to 1986, holds a special place in your heart? How does it make you feel knowing that some of the beloved cast members are no longer with us? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments below. If you've been enjoying this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.